Over the past 24 hours, northern Israel was targeted by some 100 rockets fired by Hezbollah from Lebanon. Israel responded with multiple strikes in Lebanon and Syria. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz reports.
About 100 rockets targeted several different areas of northern Israel in 3 separate waves as Hezbollah responded to alleged Israeli strikes that killed 5 people in Syria. The first salvo targeted the border city of Kiryat Shmona and a number of surrounding areas. At least 40 rockets were fired toward the city in the attacks. Several of the rockets were shot down by the Iron Dome, but some struck the northern city, causing damage to buildings. There were no reports of injuries. Later waves of Hezbollah rocket fire targeted Kibbutz Sar and Gesher Haziv. Some of the projectiles were shot down and others fell in open areas. Here, too, there were damages, but no injuries reported. In the third barrage, Hezbollah fired some 15 projectiles at the Nahariya area on the Israeli coast. The rockets were intercepted or impacted in open areas, and there were no reports of injuries or damage. In retaliation, the Air Force struck a launcher in the Blot area in South Lebanon, from which the projectiles were identified as being launched at Kiryat Shmona. Later, the Air Force targeted buildings used by Hezbollah in the villages of Kafar Kila and At Yashab, and hit a terror cell in the Yareen area. 5 people were reported killed in Israeli strikes in Syria.
In a world full of stories, whose voice will you trust? At ILTV, we deliver the truth from the heart of Israel and bring you the latest from Israel with integrity and passion. Join a community that believes in the strength and resilience of Israel. Your support means reliable, honest news direct from the source. Subscribe now. Be part of the story. Be part of Israel.
The families of 5 female IDF Lookout observers have released photos of their daughters held in Hamas captivity since October 7th. The families are demanding that Prime Minister Netanyahu finalize the hostage for ceasefire deal before traveling to Washington. ILTV's Ariella Lachiani is standing by at Hostage Square.
Hi Emily, yes, I'm here now at Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, where for the past 9 months hostage families have been gathering and rallies have been held in an attempt to put pressure on the government to do everything they can to bring the hostages home. Hostage talks are underway, and reports actually claim that we are the closest we have ever been to reaching a hostage deal, but the deal has not yet been finalised. And just yesterday, a heartbreaking photo was released by the hostage families of 5 of the female hostages, actually the 5 hostages that you see painted behind me. A photo was released of them in Hamas captivity in an attempt to urge Netanyahu to finalise a deal before he is set to fly to Washington. More in the following report. The horrific images of 5 female hostage surveillance soldiers were released by their families while demanding a meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to push for the hostages' release before his upcoming trip to Washington.
ראש הממשלה ביקש ממני להצטרף אליו לטיסה שלו לארצות הברית לנאומו בקונגרס. אני הסברתי לו שלא אוכל ולא ארגיש בנוח להצטרף אליו עד שאראה שהמגעים בנוגע לשחרורה של נעמה שלי מגיעים לקו הסיום. עד אז אני נשארת כאן בארץ וממשיכה להיאבק כדי להציל את נעמה שלי. ככל שהעסקה תקודם ויצילו את נעמה וכל שאר החטופים, אוכל לבוא ולהצטרף אפילו יחד איתה למשלחת בראשותו. בינתיים אני נשארת בארץ ומבקשת מכם, תסתכלו לה בעיניים. זו הילדה שלי. תסתכל לה בעיניים, מר בנימין נתניהו, ראש הממשלה. תיפגש איתנו מיידית כדי שנוכל להשמיע את קולה.
In one undated image, Liri Albag, Agam Berger, Karina Ariev and Daniela Gilboa can be seen sitting on mattresses on the floor of a room. They show signs of being injured and of marks left by handcuffs. A framed picture of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh is on the wall behind them. In a separate undated image, Naama Levy is seen with a heavily swollen eye and cuts on her face. All 5 are still held by Hamas in the Strip after they were kidnapped by the terrorists at Nahal Oz on October 7th.
Prime Minister Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu, I will repeat and ask you again to meet with us before you depart for the Congress. I will repeat and ask that if you do choose to give the speech, it will be a speech declaring an immediate hostage deal, which will bring back the power, the joy, the hope for the state of Israel and bring back my Daniela.
The parents of the soldiers all pleaded with Prime Minister Netanyahu to reach a hostage release deal before he departs for Washington next week ahead of his Wednesday address at the U.S. Capitol.
Day 285 of the war in Gaza. Acting on precise intelligence, the IDF struck a group of Hamas terrorists who were hiding in an UNRWA school in Nuseirat. Moving to lower intensity conflict, the IDF continues to maneuver its strategic spots in Gaza. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has the full report.
The army insists that prior to the strike on the UNRWA school in Nuseirat, it took steps to mitigate the risk of harming civilians. This included the use of aerial surveillance, precise munitions, and additional intelligence. In a statement, the army said that it attacked a group of terrorists who had operated from inside the school. 23 Palestinians were reported killed in the attack and many others wounded. It's unclear how many were Hamas gunmen and whether any of the casualties were civilians. Elsewhere in Gaza, more than 25 targets were struck by Israeli fighter jets and other aircraft. The targets included sites near a rocket launcher used to fire 3 projectiles at Sderot. Buildings used by terror groups were hit, also booby-trapped buildings and cells of gunmen. The strikes come as operations continue in Rafah. Here, IDF troops from the 162nd Division directed airstrikes that killed several gunmen and destroyed a rocket launcher. In the Netzarim corridor in central Gaza, the IDF said reservists of the Alexandroni Brigade and the 8th Brigade killed several gunmen and destroyed buildings used by Hamas as observation posts.
The NGO Human Rights Watch is certainly not known for their impartial reports when it comes to Israel and the Palestinians, but they have just released a surprising report harshly condemning Hamas's war crimes. Let's take a closer look. A new Human Rights Watch report accuses Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups of committing hundreds of war crimes on October 7th. Human Rights Watch, which historically has been extremely anti-Israel, has a history of glossing over war crimes committed by Palestinian terrorists and disproportionately focuses on Israel, so it is rare to see such ardent criticism of Hamas. The crimes mentioned in the report include deliberate and indiscriminate attacks against civilians and civilian objects, willful killing of persons in custody, cruel and inhumane treatment, sexual and gender-based violence, hostage-taking, mutilation and despoiling, robbing of bodies, use of human shields, as well as pillaging and looting. The report also correctly names Hamas as the orchestrator of the attack on October 7th, as well as other terror groups such as Islamic Jihad. In response to the accusations, Hamas claimed that the massacre did not intend to target civilians, which Human Rights Watch flatly rejected, calling it false, and adding the intentional killing and hostage-taking of civilians was planned and highly coordinated. Human Rights Watch Associate Director Belkis Will stated, "It is impossible for us to put a number of the specific instances of war crimes." Well, in the aftermath of the attempted assassination of President Trump, it's been revealed that the Islamic Republic of Iran had been plotting an assassination of Trump in retaliation for the assassination of Soleimani years ago. The Islamic Republic has also been known to carry out assassinations on foreign soil. Despite that, the U.S. officials have stated unequivocally that there is no evidence this attempted assassin had any connection to Tehran. Here to speak with us about the Iranian threat and political violence around the world is Colonel retired Richard Kemp. Richard Kemp, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to have you in studio. Just to start, I wanted to get your take on the news that the Iranian regime had developed this plot to assassinate Trump, although we don't believe at this point it had any connection to what happened. Do you suspect that there's any involvement or future plans on the part of the Islamic Republic to target Trump?
I would be surprised if the Islamic Republic hadn't got plans to assassinate Trump, even before this attempt occurred. I think that was, would have been a reasonable assumption to make. They've attempted assassinations in many different countries, including in the United States and including the United Kingdom and elsewhere. Many attempts to do so, and no doubt they will continue in the future. I've got no reason to believe that this attempt specifically was by Iran, but I suppose it's a possibility there were connections. It seems, on the basis of what we've seen, it seems relatively unlikely.
It's also a little bit odd that the suspect in question, a 20-year-old, had almost no social media, almost unheard of these days. So definitely an odd situation, to say the least. But, you know, we've seen this regime increasingly aggressive with their support for terrorism, their nuclear program. You know, they're funding the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah. And as you mentioned, political assassinations are not out of the ordinary for the Islamic Republic. Can you speak a bit about why the Islamic Republic might not want a Trump presidency?
I think it's very clear why they wouldn't want a Trump presidency, and a plan to assassinate Trump, I don't think necessarily would be a retaliatory measure, as has been suggested, against his killing of Soleimani. But of course, Trump is a big danger for Iran. You know, Trump trashed Obama's nuclear deal and froze a great deal of Iranian assets that were in the pipeline to be returned to Iran. And of course, Biden then restored the assets, gave them a lot of money, which they've been using for terrorism around the region, and has attempted to bring back the nuclear deal. Trump will revert to his previous policy, I have no doubt, and that's dangerous for Iran. I think particularly the issue of frozen assets and actually even going further to maybe endorsing any Israeli efforts to strike Iran in a bigger way than we've seen so far, and perhaps even getting the US to join, because Iran represents a really big danger for not just for Israel, but for the region and for the world.
Absolutely. I think they have a clear incentive when it comes to this. Switching gears just a little bit, I wanted to ask you about the Houthis and their continued attacks against UK, US, and other international vessels. What the US and UK done so far, has it just not been effective? I mean, what's it going to take to deter this terrorist organization, of course, again, with the backing of the Islamic Republic, from doing what they're doing?
Well, Britain and America have been probably the only two countries that have been willing to actually stand up and use military force against the Houthis in a significant way. But it's not been enough. It's been far too weak. We could have done a great deal more to smash the Houthis and to prevent what they're doing now. This is not something that we've achieved. We haven't succeeded in stopping them from attacking shipping. We could do that, but it would require a great deal more military force. And of course, the whole thing is controlled by the United States, by President Biden, who does not want, in my opinion, to use significant force against the Houthis for fear of not being able to develop his own agenda with Iran. Because, as you said, Houthis are an Iranian proxy, and he's desperate to have a relationship with Iran. And that's why also he's been so cautious about Israel striking Hezbollah, again, a proxy of Iran, and why he's been made so many efforts to try and restrain Israel dealing with Hamas, again, a proxy of Iran.
Absolutely. Well, we are running out of time, but I wanted to get your perspective on the new UK government. Do you think that this government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Keir Starmer, will be able to effectively push back against the Islamic Republic, be it in the forms of sanction or any other actions? There's been some discussion about the designation of the IRGC as a terrorist organization. What can we expect to see from this UK government?
Well, the last government, the Conservative government, was very weak on Iran. It considered prescribing, i.e. listing Hezbollah as a terrorist organization, but didn't, sorry, not Hezbollah, the Islamic Republican Guard.
Honestly, they're the same, so.
They are, you're right. But it failed to do so. And I think UK policy towards Iran is really driven by what Biden wants to do. And therefore, the policy might change. If Trump goes in the White House, we might see a stronger UK pushback against Iran, which I think is needed. And the current government, I don't think we're going to see anything proactive in relation to Iran, or indeed in relation to supporting Israel in this war, that we haven't already seen from the Conservatives. My thinking is that this government's foreign policy actions, particularly in relation to the Middle East, will be constrained to some extent by fear of Trump coming into the White House. They won't want to go too far in the wrong direction, for example, imposing an arms embargo on Israel or recognizing a Palestinian state, which is what they desire to do, because they might worry that it would upset Trump if he came in and took over.
Well, we are in very interesting times. We'll have to follow this closely and see how it plays out. But Colonel Richard Kemp, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Well, Israel awoke to the shocking story of a mother in Herzliya suspected of brutally murdering her 6-year-old son. Police arrested the suspect after she attacked a security guard near a mall, carrying an axe and dripping in blood. The guard disarmed the woman before calling in backup. The body of her son was discovered in the suspect's home in Herzliya after the suspect's arrest. The investigation into the attempted assassination of former President Trump is still underway, but a major story was brought to light yesterday after it was revealed that the Islamic Republic of Iran had intended to kill President Trump in revenge for the assassination of IRGC leader Qasem Soleimani. Let's see the full story. In recent weeks, the U.S. received intelligence from a human source that the Islamic Republic of Iran had a plan to assassinate former President Trump. In response, the Secret Service was instructed to increase his security detail on the campaign trail. The Trump campaign was also made aware of the increased threat and the greater risk that comes with outdoor rallies, but had continued to hold them nonetheless. The Secret Service stated that they had already been operating with an enhanced security detail when the attempted assassination took place, prompting more questions from the public about their performance. While the story is only coming to light now, U.S. officials have emphasized that there is no evidence to connect the actions of Thomas Matthew Crooks, who attempted to assassinate Trump on Saturday, to the regime's plot. Intelligence sources stated that there have been a large uptick in chatter about Trump across the Islamic Republic's media networks, stemming primarily from the regime's desire to take revenge on Trump for the killing of IRGC commander Qasem Soleimani years ago. The Islamic regime pledged to avenge his death, but as of now, no such action was taken against Trump. The regime in Iran, of course, rejected the accusation that there was a plot to assassinate Trump, claiming they chose instead to pursue a legal path to bring him to justice. As the Secret Service and FBI continue to investigate the attempted assassination of former President Trump, speculation continues to grow about how this could have happened in the first place, especially given the fact that there was already enhanced security for President Trump. Here to speak with us about just that is Brad Orsini of the Secure Communities Network. Brad, thanks so much for joining us on the broadcast today. I just wanted to start by asking about actually the Iran issue. The FBI has been very clear that there's no known connection between Crooks and the Islamic Republic. But as a result of this threat, Trump reportedly had enhanced security detail already. So how on earth did a 20-year-old slip past them?
Well, I can't answer specifically what happened in this particular investigation. I can tell you what is typically done in an active shooter investigation. There would have been a large threat assessment done through the Secret Service. They would have put security resources out there in any event. What I can talk about is what is going on now with the FBI, who is the lead in the investigation, and now what they are trying to uncover. Are there any other conspirators out there? And just as importantly, what is the motive? Now that that threat was neutralized that day, there's going to be an immersive investigation into the shooter's violent ideation and what led him to this attack. And at this point, the FBI will be looking at this investigation in two major phases. One, recreating that crime scene with our evidence response team, computer analysis response team, and all the resources necessary to recreate that actual event. That will feed into the investigation. There will be investigators on the ground interviewing as many people as possible to identify what that violent ideation came from, where it came from, what led this shooter to this particular act, and we will be recreating that. There is somebody out there with information that knows something about any one of these active shooters. That is just statistically accurate, and so that is what they are going to be focusing on right now.
Now, when it comes to Thomas Matthew Crooks, the entire situation is a little bit strange. I mean, normally 20-year-olds have a long track record of social media activity, and then we find out he didn't really use social media. Really, very little has been released about him or the incident in general. What do we know so far that's public about this suspect, and what is the FBI doing? A little bit of what you talked about in terms of this current stage of the investigation.
Well, at this point, I don't have any knowledge of what's going on in this particular active investigation. What I can tell you, what I can assure you that the FBI is doing is everything possible to uncover that motive, to go through every inch of social media, to look through his cell phone, get it to that computer analysis response team. Any kind of computer, cell phone, anything he may have had access to, anything his friends, relatives has access to. Now this investigation is going to span out. A lot of times in active shooters, we know that motive right away. Unfortunately, there are instances where people hide those motives for whatever reason, and now it's going to be an investigation. We encourage people to remain calm, remain vigilant, and provide that information to law enforcement, especially the FBI now. There are going to be people that were at that rally that took videos. Every one of the videos that has been taken, they're going to want to get that evidence. They're going to want to just recreate everything. Anybody that knew this individual, they're going to want to talk to and really build a snapshot into the life of the individual. Build out those anomalies on what happened and what led to that shooting.
Now, we know that the Islamic Republic of Iran has wanted to take out both former President Trump and the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo for some time over the assassination of Soleimani. I'm wondering if you can speak to the FBI's protocol when it comes to dealing with high-profile threats from entire nations, like in the case of Iran.
I think the FBI deals with the threats the way they deal with them internally, externally. They're going to collect that information. They're going to analyze that information to develop whether it's a true threat to the individual. They're going to work with the individual. They're going to work with community members, stakeholders to identify what a true threat is, whether it's international or domestic. They're looking at threats every single day to high-profile individuals. This is nothing new that anybody that is in the political world that gets threatened. This is not new in the country. It's not new in anywhere in the world. So we have to be hyper vigilant right now and make sure that if we hear information that somebody is going to hurt somebody else, look to shoot, look to assassinate, whatever that is, we need to make sure we collect that information and get it in the hands of law enforcement.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for your time, Brad Orsini. We are unfortunately out of time, but thank you for joining us and sharing some insight on the style and what they're focused on in this investigation.
Thank you very much.
Well, a new trend is popping up amongst the anti-Israel groups in the West of rewriting the Arabic calligraphy in the logo of the terrorist organization Hamas to read, "I love chocolate milk." Anti-Israel activists have been spotted at various events and on social media with the revamped Hamas logo. But the statement isn't coming from a place of rejecting Hamas, rather to scare the Jewish community and fool viewers into accusing them of supporting Hamas and being racist for not reading Arabic. Though why these protesters would expect the general public to read Arabic in the United States or Australia is as of yet unclear. Even an Australian senator, Lydia Thorpe, got involved, posting a photo with the Hamas headband, which the terrorists used on October 7th, and stating, "I support this message." The post was later deleted after it was pointed out that under Australian law, promoting symbols that the public would easily confuse with Hamas is also against the law, as Hamas is a designated terrorist organization in Australia. The Australian Jewish community condemned the senator's stunt, saying this is the equivalent of dressing in a Nazi uniform while changing the SS letters slightly. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Clear skies are expected tonight around the country, with temperatures set to reach lows of 23 degrees Celsius or 73 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow we should be seeing sunny skies and hot temperatures, sitting at highs of 35 degrees Celsius or 96 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a wrap for today's news. For the latest updates from Israel on all your devices, be sure to follow our ILTV channels, subscribe to our newsletter, and explore our website, iltv.tv. Stay informed with the latest news straight from the heart of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.